Hello. For this lesson, I'm going to discuss about Java for loops. Loops, or rather. Okay, so loops in programming is a very important lesson for programmers to do, since without loop we could not create a lot of complex programs, since loop will really manipulate a lot of data types. It will really manipulate a lot of codes, really depending on your program. So I really recommend to a lot of you to really deep dive onto for loops. Okay, so in programming, loop is used to repeat a block of code until the specified condition is met. So, for example, we have a start here. So, when we start the loop, we first initialize any value. So, let's say it's 1, and then for example, there's a condition that is if 1 is if 1 is less than 10, then we do something. So, which is code inside the loop if it's true. And then, for example, after the condition is met and after the code inside the loop is processed, we would update the counter. Like, for example, I plus 1, so I will become 2. Still, 2 is less than 10, so it will still run the code inside the loop. So, and it will go so on and so forth. That's why it's called a loop. And until, for example, I became 10, and 10 is not less than 10, so it will become false, then the loop will stop. So, this is a simple example of a loop, and uh, it is much better to show it in a code rather just than just to speak. So one of the example of loops are for loop. So when do we use for loop? So we use for loop when you want to know exactly, or we know exactly how many times you want to loop. So okay, so here's the diagram here. Let's say we initialize something. We test the expression. If it's true, we run the code inside the loop, and then we update the expression. So for example, 1 becomes 2, and then it will test the expression. The expression, let's say like 2 is less than 10, then it will run again until our initialized value becomes 10. It will go into false, then it will end the loop. So let me show you to the implementation of code. So let's say we have a very simple for loop where I is equal to 1 and I is less than or equal to 10, then I plus plus. Okay, so as we can see, when we start a for loop, we initialize an integer I to 1. So we initialize I to 1. And then when I is less than or equal to 10, we increase I by 1. So meaning this, while this is met, while these two conditions are met, it will run the code inside here. After the code inside this block is finished, then we're gonna run. We're gonna add the I to the incremented value. So it will stop once our I becomes 10, which will go out of this loop and then run the code with whatever it's below here. So let's say, for example, let's just test for example, we just want to print 1 to 10. So we could just simply put I here, since we know that 1 I will print until for 10 times. Okay, so as you can see, I, which is 1, loop until 10. So it means 1 to 3, it ran for 10 times. So we know that our for loop will run 10 times. That's why we're gonna use for loops. Also, for loops can be very useful when we're trying to run something until we're going to meet some condition. Like for example, we need to like add we like to add something for 10 times. So let's say like we have a number is equal to 2. And let's say for every for loop, number will okay, sorry, let's add also sum. So let's say sum is equal to 0, and let's say sum is plus equal to number. So okay, so meaning for this one is it means sum is equal to sum plus number. So as I've said in the previous video, that equal sign means just declaration. So sum declares sum as sum plus the number. So sum, since sum is 0, 0 plus 2, then let's just let's let's print sum. So in the first loop, what will happen is that since number is 2, the total answer will be 2, right? So after the first loop is finished, since we know that I is 2, it will still run again, right? So we know that sum already has a value of 2. And since we add 2 plus 2, so it will become 4. and 6 and so forth until we do run until 10 times, and I'll just show it by running this program. As you can see, 2 is here until 20, so it added 2 for 10 times. So for loops are very useful when we know exactly how many times we want to run this loop. So there's another loop called while loop. While loop runs the block of code until the condition met. So their logic are actually the same. So here, as you can see here, we test the expression, and if it's true, we'll run their loop, and then until it is false, we just run this loop. So let me create a same example using a while loop. So let me just comment out this one. So let's say the implementation while loop is we put the while loop here, and we put the expression here first, only for, like, let's say while I int I is sorry, int cannot be I is equal to 0. Let's say I is less than or equal to 10. Then we want our sum to be added to the number, and then update the I once. So what happening here is we know that I is less than or equal to 10. So we add the sum to the number, and then we increment I by 1. Then since I is now 1, it will run until it becomes 10. Then this while loop is finished. So let's change this to 1. So we're gonna still get the same results. Oh, sorry, I did not print the. Yes, and we're now gonna receive the same result, which is 2 to 20. So maybe some of you might think that, wow, what's the difference of those two? Like, why won't we just use for loop if we know exactly how many times we would want to print, right? Um, yes, for this kind of simple program, yes, we could say that for loop is much more efficient since it's much more visually easier to read. But in there are a lot of there are really a lot of programs that they have like complex algorithms or codes. Like we could for example, we don't know how many times our code will execute depending on the input. So that's the advantage of while loop. Like for example, we made a while statement, but we don't know how many times will it run. Like we just want to run until the condition is met. Unlike for loop, it will always run until what we place here. For example, when we place this, whether the condition is met or not, it will just run 10 times for the fix, even though if we don't need the value for the 10th loop. Like for example, there was an instant like we only need 3 true values, but for loop we run 10 times regardless you need the value or not. But for the while loop, it will accurately just run the loop, only the condition met, depending on your code. So uh, I'm pretty sure that a lot of you will encounter the differences of while loop and for loop, and each of their loops have their own advantage and disadvantages. But I recommend that you guys study much more deep about these loops. What I could only show you here is just the basic loops, and I've just shown you the main difference of them and their theory about them. Thank you.